The moon turned emerald green last night. You don't remember it because your memory was rewritten at 3 a.m., but look at your old photos. The evidence is starting to leak through. Imagine waking up tomorrow and the moon is a vibrant emerald green. You'd notice, right? What if you didn't? What if it happened overnight and somehow your very memory was rewritten? This video explores the chilling possibility of a cosmic shift so profound humanity was oblivious, leaving behind only fragmented whispers of a reality that once was. The first time I understood something was wrong, it wasn't because I looked up. It was because my phone tried to protect me from myself. I was scrolling through my camera roll at lunch, half awake, thumb moving on instinct, when a photo I didn't remember taking snagged my attention. A city skyline at night. My window reflection faint in the glass. And above the buildings, low, heavy, unmistakable, hung a moon the color of a fresh bruise turning green. At first I assumed it was a filter, a glitch, a weird HDR artifact. My brain reached for the easiest explanation, like a hand groping for a light switch in a dark room. Then I noticed the timestamp, 2:58 a.m., 3 minutes before the hour I couldn't account for. I zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. The moon stayed green, not neon, not cartoonish. A deep mineral green like oxidized copper in moonlight. The kind of green that felt old, patient, and impossible. My throat tightened the way it does when you read a sentence twice and realize the words haven't changed. Only your understanding has. I opened my messages and searched for moon. I found a text I'd sent to my friend Lena the night before. Are you seeing this? Don't look away. There was no reply. Not because she ignored me. Because on her side, the message thread didn't contain it. On my phone, it was there. On hers, it never existed. Lena worked nights at the small university observatory. She liked to tell me that most people think telescopes are romantic, until you're the one alone in a dome with a motor whining like a tired animal and a sky that never blinks. When I called her, she answered in the flat voice of someone who'd been awake too long. Tell me you slept, she said. I slept, I lied. Lena, check your logs. Check your photos from last night. Pause. I heard her keyboard. Then a soft, confused laugh that died mid-breath. I have photos, she said slowly. The moon looks normal. Define normal. She hesitated. Off-white. A little blue, maybe. Like always. I stared at my screen again. Green. The color of an old statue after rain. Do you remember being awake at 3? I asked. No, she said too quickly. Do you? My mouth opened and nothing came out. Because the honest answer was a hole. A clean slice taken out of the night. I tried to backtrack. Tried to reconstruct myself the way you reconstruct a dream before it melts. I remembered brushing my teeth. I remembered the hum of the refrigerator. I remembered standing at the window because something outside had drawn my attention with the quiet insistence of a fingertip tapping glass. Then, nothing. And after nothing, I remembered waking up in my bed with my phone on the floor and the taste of pennies in my mouth, like I'd bitten my tongue hard enough to bleed. Lena sent me one of her images. A crisp shot, telescopic detail, craters like fingerprints. The moon in her photo was pale, faintly bluish, exactly what people would call normal if they didn't think about how strange it is to see the same face every night and never ask who's watching back. I sent her mine. She didn't respond for almost a full minute. When she did, her words were misspelled. That's fake, she wrote. That's edited. Avery, don't do this. I didn't edit it. The metadata said the photo was taken on my phone. The file signature matched. No third-party app. No filter. I sent her a screen recording of me pulling it up, zooming in, opening details. I even filmed my hand so she couldn't accuse me of swapping screens. Her reply was a single line. Delete it. That hit wrong. Not because it was unreasonable. Because it didn't sound like her. Lena was the kind of person who leaned toward mystery, not away from it. She chased comets for fun. She once drove 2 hours to watch a meteor shower through a break in storm clouds because she said she wanted to see the sky drop its coins. Why would I delete it? I asked. She called instead of texting. Her voice came through low and urgent, like she was afraid of being overheard by the walls. Avery, I don't know what that is, she said. But I just tried to pull the external archive from last night. The folder exists. The file names exist. The space exists. The images are blank. Blank. Like someone saved a picture of nothing. Black frames. But the system thinks they're valid. A chill moved up my arms, raising gooseflesh like a warning. Lena, I said carefully, what time were those frames saved? I heard her inhale through her teeth. 3:01, she whispered. I leaned back from my desk as if distance could protect me. Outside the cafe window, the afternoon was bright, safe, full of people with errands and coffee and ordinary lives. A woman laughed into her phone. A kid dragged a backpack, the straps too loose. Nobody looked like the kind of person who'd survived a rewrite. My gaze dropped to my own hands. I turned them palm up, half expecting to see ink smeared there. Evidence I'd written something in the missing hour. There was nothing. But my phone, my stupid, faithful phone, held a photo that shouldn't exist. And the worst part wasn't the green moon. The worst part was the creeping certainty that if I looked up tonight and saw the moon pale and normal, my mind would accept it like it had always been that way. Because maybe it had. Maybe always was editable. After work, I went home and did the thing you do when you're trying to prove you aren't losing your mind. I gathered objects. I laid them out like a ritual. My old DSLR from a drawer. A notebook with thick paper. A cheap analog alarm clock with hands instead of digits. I wrote the date in ink. I wrote in capital letters, "If you forget, trust this page." I set the alarm clock for 2:55 a.m. Then I added another line beneath it, slower this time because my hand wanted to shake. Look up. I didn't tell myself why. I didn't let my brain rehearse explanations. If I gave it a story, it would sand down the edges until it fit. That's what brains do. They prefer a lie that makes sense over a truth that doesn't. Night came like a lid closing. At 2:54 a.m. I was awake. Not naturally. Awake the way you are when you're listening for a sound you're afraid to hear, every nerve stretched toward the future. The analog clock ticked loudly, each second a small metal footstep. 2:58. I picked up my phone and opened the camera. 2:59. My fingers hovered over the shutter. My breath came shallow. The second hand slid toward 12. And right before it hit, my screen flickered. Not like a notification. Not like a normal glitch. The camera view stuttered, and for a single frame, one heartbeat of time, the room was tinted the same mineral green as the moon in my photo. Then everything went dark. Not the lights. Not the power. My vision. Like someone had pulled a cloth over my eyes from the inside. The ticking stopped. In the silence, a sound rose from somewhere behind my thoughts. A soft dragging like a pencil being pulled across paper. When I came back to myself, the clock read 3:07 a.m. The notebook was open to a fresh page. And in my own handwriting, tight, hurried, and unfamiliar, were 3 words that made my stomach drop as if the floor had tilted. And noticed you. Morning didn't feel like morning. It felt like waking up after you've been anesthetized, your body present, your mind lagging behind, everything too clean around the edges. I stood over the notebook until my coffee went cold, rereading those words until they stopped looking like language and started looking like claw marks. The rational part of me tried to bargain. Sleep writing. Night terror. A prank I'd played on myself. Carbon monoxide. Anything but the alternative, that something out there had reached into the machinery of my memory and turned a dial. I called Lena. She didn't answer. I checked my sent messages. The photo of the green moon was still there. The text to her, "Are you seeing this? Don't look away," was gone. Not deleted. Gone in the way a tooth is gone after it's been pulled. The socket smooth, the absence bleeding into normal. That's when I understood the rules were shifting under my feet. Some evidence remained. Some was being corrected. And the correction was not random. At noon I drove to my sister's house on a hunch I didn't want to name. She taught 2nd grade. Kids drew what they saw before their brains learned to cover it with explanations. Her name was Imani. She met me at the door with a dish towel over her shoulder and that look older siblings give you when you show up unannounced, half annoyance, half concern. "You look like you swallowed a ghost," she said. "I need to see the kids' art," I said. Imani blinked. "What?" "Their drawings. Anything from last week. Science unit. Night sky. Whatever you have." She studied my face long enough to decide I wasn't joking. "Okay," she said slowly. "But if this is for one of your weird online stories." "It's not," I cut in and heard how sharp I sounded. "Please." In her classroom, the walls were bright with construction paper and motivational quotes. The normalcy was almost painful. I stood among tiny desks and tried to breathe as if the world hadn't tilted. Imani pulled out a folder and spread drawings across a table. Moons with smiling faces. Moons with sunglasses. Moons like crescent bananas. Stars like glitter explosions. And then I saw it. A drawing done in heavy crayon strokes. A night sky colored in deep navy. A house with yellow windows. And above it, a full moon colored bright, unarguable yellow. The kind of yellow children use when they're drawing something they trust. In the corner, in uneven letters, "Moon is yellow like before." My heart thudded hard enough to make my vision pulse. Who drew this? I asked. Imani leaned in. That's Milo's. He's intense. Sweet but intense. When? 2 nights ago. She frowned. Why? I pointed at the words. Did he say anything when he turned it in? Imani's expression shifted, her teacher face smoothing into something more careful. He asked me if I remembered the green moon, she said. I told him the moon isn't green. He got upset. Not tantrum upset. More like scared. He kept saying, it was green and then it wasn't and you're acting like I'm wrong. The air in the classroom felt thinner. Where is he now? I asked. In the library, Imani said. But Avery, what is this? You're freaking me out. I didn't answer. I followed her down the hall, footsteps too loud, my mind racing ahead. Milo sat alone at a low table, a book open but unread. He was small for his age, hair sticking up in a way that made him look permanently startled. When he saw Imani, he smiled. When he saw me, his smile faltered as if he was trying to decide whether I was safe. This is my brother, Imani said gently. Avery. He likes mysteries. Milo's eyes flicked to my hands, to the notebook I carried like a talisman. Do you remember the moon? I asked him, keeping my voice soft. He didn't hesitate. It was green, he said, and it made my stomach feel sick. Imani's breath caught. She tried to laugh it off. Milo, honey? No, Milo said louder. His face tightened with frustration. It was green, and then everyone forgot. And I tried to tell my mom and she got mad and said I was lying. But I'm not lying. I crouched to his level. When did everyone forget? He stared at me like the answer was obvious. When the house got quiet, he said. When the clocks did the thing. What thing? Milo lifted his hands and mimed a circle, then a sudden jump. They skipped, he whispered, like they were scared to touch 3. Imani straightened. Okay, that's enough, she said, too firm. Let's not scare him. But Milo wasn't scared of us. He was scared of being alone inside his own memory. Do you have drawings from last night? I asked. He nodded and reached into his backpack. He pulled out a folded sheet of paper and opened it with careful fingers, like it was fragile. The drawing showed a window, a person standing behind it, and outside in the sky, a moon-colored pale blue. But Milo had scribbled over it with jagged green lines so hard the paper tore. Underneath, in shaky letters, stop changing it. A spike of nausea hit me, sudden and sharp. Not fear, recognition. The way your body reacts when it sees a pattern before your mind catches up. Did you see it change? I asked. Milo nodded. I saw it blink, he said, like an eye closing. Imani's phone buzzed. She checked it, frowned, and her face drained of color. What? I asked. It's Lena, she said. Or, it says Lena. She held out the screen. A text message from Lena's number, short and wrong. Do not look for me. It makes it hungry. My mouth went dry. I called Lena immediately. The line rang once. Then a recorded voice said the number was not in service. Imani stared at her phone as if it had betrayed her. That can't be right, she whispered. I talked to her last month at your birthday. I did not tell her that my phone's contact list no longer included Lena's last name. It now read simply, Lena, Anomaly. I backed away from the table, the classroom spinning softly around the edges. The word, anomaly, didn't belong in a contact field. It belonged in a lab report. A footnote. A warning. Milo reached out and grabbed my sleeve. His grip was surprisingly strong. Are you like me? He whispered. I swallowed. I don't know, I admitted. He leaned closer, voice barely audible. My mom says I make things up, he said. But the moon told me not to forget. It said if I forget, it can come closer. My skin prickled. The moon told you? I echoed. Milo nodded, eyes wide, earnest, too old for his face. Not with words, he said. With feelings. Like when you know you're being watched, but you don't see anyone. Imani pulled him gently back. Milo, sweetheart, let's go pick a new book, okay? He didn't move until he'd looked at me one last time. Don't let it fix you, he said. On the drive home, the sky felt too big. I kept glancing upward even though the sun was out, as if the moon might be hiding behind the blue like a stain under paint. At home, I dug through old hard drives the way people dig through ruins after a fire, hoping for something recognizable. Vacation photos. Birthday pictures. A night shot from a camping trip years ago. Me holding a flashlight under my chin, trying to scare Lena while she laughed. In that photo, the moon was white. Normal. Familiar. But when I clicked forward to the next image in the folder, taken seconds later, the moon was pale blue. And the one after that? Emerald green. My heart hammered. 3 photos, 3 moons, 1 night, no reason. The timestamps were close, but the metadata had been altered in places, as if a hand had reached in and smeared the ink. I enlarged the green moon until it filled my screen. There was something in the texture. Not a face, not a figure. A pattern that didn't belong to craters and shadow. A thin line like handwriting. I adjusted contrast, increased sharpness. The line resolved into a curve. Letters. Not English. Not any alphabet I knew. But my brain still read it the way you read a warning sign by shape and urgency. A message carved into light. And as I stared at it, the screen dimmed on its own as if my phone was trying to look away. The room went quiet. Too quiet. Then the analog clock on my shelf, set hours earlier, working fine all day, made a tiny choking sound like a cough trapped in gears. Its hands jumped. From 2:59 to 3 o'clock. And every hair on my body lifted because I hadn't set it for that. The air thickened, pressing against my ears. My vision narrowed. The green moon on my monitor seemed to swell, pushing forward as if the screen were thinning. A sound rose again, the same sound from the night before. A pencil dragging across paper. And in the corner of my desk, my notebook flipped open by itself. A pen rolled, stopped, then moved, pulled by something I couldn't see. Ink bled onto the page in quick, violent strokes. I grabbed the notebook, hands shaking, and read the new line that had been written for me. Stop recording. The lights didn't flicker. The power didn't fail. But my memory did. For a split second, I couldn't remember my own name. And in that blank space, something else pressed in. An impression of vastness, cold and attentive, like the moment you realize the ocean has noticed you're swimming. Then the clock ticked again. And the room exhaled. I stood there, sweating, notebook clutched to my chest, understanding one brutal fact. This wasn't just a mystery I was investigating. It was a boundary I was touching. And something on the other side was starting to push back. I didn't go to sleep that night. Not because I was brave, but because sleep felt like opening a door and stepping through without knowing what would be waiting on the other side. I turned every light on. I taped my curtains open. I played music just to keep sound in the room, as if silence might invite something to sit beside me. At 2:30 a.m., I drove to the observatory. The campus was empty, sidewalks glossy with dew, the buildings looming like dark boxes. The observatory dome sat at the edge of the lot, white and round, innocent looking in the moonlight. I parked and stared at it for a full minute before getting out. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. The air had that late-night sharpness that makes every breath feel like it has teeth. The door was unlocked. That should have been the first sign. Inside, the hallway lights were on. A faint smell of burnt dust lingered, the scent electronics make when they've been pushed too hard. "Lena?" I called. No answer. The dome room was open. The telescope pointed upward, locked into position like a finger indicating a direction. And on the floor near the control desk, Lena's ID badge lay face down, the lanyard snapped cleanly as if someone had cut it. I picked it up and turned it over. Her photo stared back at me, smiling, alive. But her name under the photo had been printed over with a single word, as if the plastic itself had been reissued. Anomaly. My stomach lurched. On the desk, her observation notebook was open. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, numbers, coordinates, notes about atmospheric clarity. Then halfway down a page, the handwriting changed. Still her letters, but hurried, slanted. 2:57, color shift begins. Not atmospheric. Not lens. Not me. 2:58, the moon is wrong. It is not a surface. It is a mask. 2:59, hearing scratching in my head. 3 o'clock. The line ended. The ink trailed off the page as if her hand had jerked away. Beneath it, on the next page, there was only one sentence, written in thick black marker so hard it had dented the paper. Writes US back. I stood there listening to my own breathing, the building too still, the telescope too patient. Then the dome lights dimmed slightly, not flickering, just lowering as if someone had turned a dial. A voice spoke behind me. Not Lena's. Not anyone's. It wasn't sound in the air. It was sound pressed directly into my thoughts, intimate and violating. Stop making copies. I spun around. The room was empty. My pulse pounded in my ears. I backed toward the desk, fingers searching for anything solid. The voice came again, clearer, the words shaped like a suggestion pretending to be a command. You are not meant to keep drafts. Draft. The word hit like a spike. As if reality itself was a document rewritten cleanly each night, and I was saving previous versions like a thief saving incriminating emails. I forced myself to speak out loud because silence felt like agreement. "What are you?" I whispered. The telescope motor whined softly, adjusting by a fraction. And in my head, the answer formed, not a sentence but an image. A hand erasing chalk from a board. Not malicious. Not angry. Efficient. I staggered back, bumping the desk. A monitor woke from sleep, displaying the night sky feed from a mounted camera. Stars scattered like salt. The moon centered in frame. It looked pale blue. Normal in the way Lena had said. My throat tightened. "Show me," I said, not sure who I was talking to. "Show me what you changed." The image on the monitor held steady. Then, just for a blink, like an eyelid closing, the moon's color shifted. Pale blue. Emerald green. And in the split second it was green, the surface didn't look like rock. It looked like depth, like something behind glass. A liquid sheen. A suggestion of movement that made my skin crawl. I leaned closer. In the green light, faint shapes drifted, thin lines curling, intersecting, the way ink spreads in water. Writing. Not carved into the moon. Floating behind it. The monitor snapped back to pale blue as if embarrassed. My phone buzzed. A calendar notification I hadn't set. 3 a.m., correction window. My blood went cold. I checked who created it. There was no creator listed. Just a gray field that said, System. A sharp knock echoed from the hallway. I flinched so hard my shoulder cramped. I held my breath and listened. Another knock, closer. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, the cadence wrong, as if whoever was walking was imitating a human pace from memory. "Hello?" I called, voice cracking. The dome door creaked open. A man stepped inside. He was older, maybe late 60s, with a thin frame and a long coat that looked too heavy for the season. His hair was white, his eyes sharp. He moved like someone who had practiced being calm. "You shouldn't be here," he said, and his voice was real enough to make me dizzy with relief. "Who are you?" I demanded. He glanced at the telescope, then at Lena's notebook in my hand. His expression tightened, pain flashing across his face like a shadow. "You found her notes," he said. Not a question. "Where is Lena?" My voice rose. "What happened to her?" He swallowed. "The same thing that happens to anyone who pulls too hard on a seam," he said. "They get stitched into the new version." I stared at him. "I'm calling the police." His laugh was short and humorless. "And what will you tell them?" "That your friend has been renamed an anomaly by the moon." He stepped closer, careful, as if approaching an injured animal. "My name is Dr. Soren Hallberg," he said. "I ran this observatory before Lena. I stopped because I learned." "Learned what?" He looked up at the pale moon in the dome opening, and his eyes reflected its light. "That the moon isn't just a rock," he said quietly. "It's a calibration point, an anchor for the story humans tell themselves about the sky. Change it and you can change everything attached to it." My mouth went dry. "Who can change it?" Soren's gaze drifted back to me. "Something that lives in the gap between what you see and what you remember," he said. "Something that edits continuity." I wanted to dismiss him, to call him paranoid, to laugh. But the notebook in my hand said otherwise. My missing time said otherwise. Milo's torn drawing said otherwise. Soren reached into his coat and pulled out a thin folder, edges worn. "I kept artifacts," he said. "The things it didn't fully rewrite. Because sometimes it misses. Or sometimes it allows leaks as bait." "Bait?" I repeated. He nodded once. "To see who bites." He opened the folder and slid out a photograph. Old, glossy, taken with a film camera. A full moon over a field of dark trees. The moon was white. Not blue. Not green. White like bone. On the back, handwritten, July 14th, 1998, moon unchanged. My hand shook as I took it. "Why would it allow artifacts?" I asked. Soren's jaw tightened. "Because curiosity is a predictable reflex," he said. "And predictable things are easy to manage." The monitor on the desk flickered. The sky feed stuttered, briefly pixelating. Soren's head snapped toward it. His face drained of color. "It's close," he whispered. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. 2:59 a.m., last safe minute. Soren grabbed my wrist, grip iron strong for his age. "Listen," he said urgently. "If you want to keep your mind, you need anchors it can't overwrite easily. Paper helps. Film helps. But the strongest anchor is another person who remembers with you. Shared memory is harder to delete cleanly." "What about Milo?" I blurted. Soren's eyes widened slightly. A child remembered? He asked, almost to himself. That's bad. Why? Because if it's failing to rewrite children, he said, voice tight, it means the correction is straining, which means the edit it's making is bigger than color. The dome lights dimmed again, and from somewhere beyond the open slit of the dome, the moon's pale light shifted, just a shade, toward green. Soren released my wrist and took a step back as if distance mattered. It's starting, he said. At 3 it will try to smooth you, make you agree, make you forget the rough edges. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs. What happens if I fight it? I asked. Soren met my gaze and there was no comfort there, only honesty. Then it will decide you're not worth preserving, he said. A sound rose in my head like a pencil dragged hard across paper. The second hand on the wall clock crawled toward 12. 2:59. Soren's voice dropped to a hiss. Don't look at it when it turns, he said. It uses your attention like a pen. The clock clicked. 3 o'clock. And the moon above us blinked green. I don't remember the next 10 minutes as a sequence. I remember fragments, like photos scattered across a floor after a box has been kicked open. Soren yelling my name. The monitor flaring green-white. The feeling of someone's fingers in my skull, turning pages. I remember the sensation of agreement sliding into place inside me, smooth, warm, seductive. A thought that wasn't mine forming in my mouth. Of course it's always been this color. Why wouldn't it be? And I remember biting down so hard on the inside of my cheek that blood filled my mouth, copper and pain, because pain is an anchor. When I came back, I was on the observatory floor, my back against the desk. The dome slit was closed. Dawn light seeped through the edges. Soren sat across from me, exhausted, his face gray. You stayed, he said, sounding surprised. I touched my mouth. Blood on my fingers. My hand shook. Where's Lena? I asked again because if I stopped asking, I was afraid the question would be erased. Soren looked away. I don't know, he admitted. Not in any way that matters. There are versions. Sometimes people become footnotes. Sometimes they become dreams other people insist they never had. I forced myself to stand. My knees wobbled. We need proof that survives, I said. Something too public to erase cleanly. Soren's eyes sharpened. Public proof is the first thing it corrects, he said. It doesn't like crowds noticing the seams. Then we need proof from before, I insisted. From a sealed source. Something that's been physically isolated from the rewrite. Soren stared at me for a long moment, then nodded once, reluctantly. A time capsule, he said. The word hit like a bell. He led me down to the archive room beneath the observatory, a cramped space smelling of paper and dust. He rummaged through filing cabinets until he found an old campus brochure, yellowed at the edges. He pointed to a paragraph with a shaking finger. Centennial Time Capsule, sealed 2024 to be opened 2034. Why would that help? I asked. Because it's been sealed, Soren said. And if the seal predates the strongest corrections, it might hold an older version of the moon. A caption. A photograph. Something with context. My pulse quickened. Where is it? Soren exhaled. The campus museum, he said. On display behind glass. Which means cameras. Security. Records. Records can be rewritten, I said. Soren's gaze flicked up. Yes, he said. But physical objects are stubborn. And stubbornness is what we have. That afternoon I pulled Imani into it. Not the cosmic theory, not yet. I showed her Milo's drawing again. I showed her my photo. I showed her the notebook pages that appeared without my consent. Imani's face hardened as she read. She was scared, but it didn't turn her soft. It turned her sharp. My student isn't lying, she said quietly. And my brother isn't crazy. Can you keep Milo close? I asked. If something happens, if people start treating him like he never existed. Imani's jaw clenched. Don't say that, she whispered. Then after a beat, but yes, I'll keep him with me. That night, Soren and I broke into the campus museum. Not with movie-style lasers and acrobatics. With a borrowed keycard from a grad student Soren still had influence over, and the quiet, steady terror of doing something illegal because the alternative felt worse. The museum was a long rectangular space with glass cases and dim lighting. History displayed like bones. Old uniforms, archived newspapers, plaques with names nobody read. The time capsule sat on a pedestal in the center, a metal cylinder the size of a small barrel, engraved with the year 2024. A little sign beside it explained the ceremony, the speeches, the message to the future. I stared at it as if it might start breathing. Soren crouched to inspect the seal. If we open it, he murmured, we can't unopen it. The world may notice the disturbance. The world doesn't notice anything, I said, bitterness creeping in. That's the problem. He looked up sharply. It notices, he corrected. It just agrees not to. We worked in silence. Tools wrapped in cloth to muffle sound. The museum cameras were real, but Soren had brought a device that looped their feed. He didn't tell me where he got it. I didn't ask. Everyone becomes a little criminal when reality becomes the enemy. When the seal finally gave, it made a soft metallic sigh like relief. Soren lifted the lid. Inside were neatly packed items in archival bags. A campus hoodie, a letter, a flash drive, photos and envelopes, a small children's book, a newspaper, and a single printed photograph on top, placed like a centerpiece. A full moon over the university clock tower, white, clearly white. A caption beneath it, typed and laminated. Our moon as it has always been. My breath left me in a shaky exhale. Soren's eyes shone with something like triumph and grief. This is it, I whispered. This is proof. Then my phone buzzed. Not a notification. A call. From Lena. My hands went numb as I answered. Avery, Lena said, and her voice sounded distant, warped, as if traveling through water. Don't bring it out. Lena? I choked. Where are you? Are you okay? A brittle laugh came through the line, full of static. Okay is a story, she said. I'm in the margin. What does that mean? It means I can see the edits, she whispered. I can hear it drafting. It's not just the moon. It's practicing. Soren leaned in, face tight. Lena, he said loudly, listen to me. We have a photograph from 2024. A sealed artifact. There was a pause. Then Lena's voice turned urgent, sharp enough to cut. If you show them, she said, it will correct harder. We'll take more. People. Places. Entire days. It doesn't like being contradicted. We have to, I said, panic rising. We can't live in a lie we don't even know is a lie. Lena inhaled raggedly. Then do it carefully, she said. Analog. Many copies. Spread them. Make it expensive to erase. A crash echoed from somewhere in the museum, far down the hall. Soren froze. I held my breath, listening. Another sound followed, the slow squeal of a door opening. We weren't alone. Soren grabbed the photo, stuffed it into a folder, and shoved other items back into the capsule with shaking hands. The footsteps came closer, measured, unhurried. Imani's words flashed in my mind. My student isn't lying. Milo's warning echoed, don't let it fix you. The museum lights dimmed, the way they had in the observatory, as if the building itself was lowering its voice. I whispered into the phone, Lena, who's coming? Lena's answer was barely audible, soaked in static. Not who, she whispered. What? The footsteps stopped outside the gallery. The handle turned, and as the door began to swing inward, my phone screen lit up with a final calendar notification, stark and gray. 3 a.m., public correction. The door opened to an empty hallway. No guard. No intruder. No human silhouette to explain the footsteps that had been so real my bones still felt them. Soren didn't relax. He stared into the hallway like he expected the air to step forward and introduce itself. Close it, he whispered. I closed it, hands shaking. My phone call with Lena had ended on its own. No goodbye. No click. Just silence like a line being cut. We left the museum with the kind of speed that tries to outrun dread. In the car, Soren kept checking the rearview mirror even though the road behind us was empty. I kept checking my phone, terrified the photograph would vanish from the folder like Lena's message had. It didn't vanish. Not yet. That morning we made copies the old-fashioned way. Not cloud storage. Not social media. Not anything that could be updated quietly. We printed the time capsule photo on cheap paper until the ink cartridges bled dry. We used a film camera to photograph the printouts. We wrote captions in pen. We folded copies into envelopes. We spread them the way people spread contraband, into library books, under windshields, taped inside bathroom stalls, tucked behind frames in thrift stores. We mailed them to addresses we found in old directories, people who still pay bills by check, people whose lives left paper trails. Imani helped. She didn't ask for more proof. She'd crossed that line when Milo cried over being called a liar. Milo drew for us too. Pages and pages of moons in different colors. Yellow, white, green. A purple one with a crack down the center like an egg. On the last page, he drew a person standing on a hill looking up at the sky. Above them, the moon was drawn as a circle filled with tight scribbles. and inside the scribbles Milo had written a sentence in his careful child handwriting. "IT reads your eyes." By afternoon, the first wave of responses arrived. Not from the public, from the system. My email filled with automated account recovery messages I hadn't requested. Password resets. Security alerts. A bank notification asking if I recognized a purchase I hadn't made. Soren's landline rang and rang with nobody on the other end. Imani's school called to tell her, politely, that there was no record of Milo being enrolled. Imani drove to the school and stood at the front office with Milo beside her, demanding answers. The secretary, someone Imani had known for years, smiled in a confused, strained way and said, "Ma'am, there's no such student. Are you sure you're at the right building?" Milo looked up at Imani with wet eyes but didn't cry. He just held her hand tighter. Imani called me from the parking lot, voice shaking with rage. "It's starting," she said. "It's correcting the people who remember." Soren's face tightened when I told him. "It's not correcting randomly," he said. "It's cutting the anchor points. Children. Witnesses. Anyone who makes the lie expensive." I stared at the printed photo of the white moon, feeling a strange grief for something as simple as a color. "How do we stop it?" I asked. Soren was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "We don't stop it. We survive it long enough to learn its limits." That night, we planned something reckless. If 3 a.m. was the correction window, we would meet it head-on, awake, together, anchored in a shared moment. We would record on film, write in ink, and keep our eyes on each other instead of the moon. We gathered at my apartment. Me, Soren, Imani, and Milo. The living room was lit like a small stage. Printouts taped to the walls. Camera set up. Notebooks open. A tape recorder humming softly, magnetic tape spinning like a heartbeat. At 2:50 a.m., Milo sat cross-legged on the rug drawing circles that never fully closed. Soren checked his watch. "When it starts," he said, "you'll feel the urge to rationalize. That's the hook. Don't take it." Imani squeezed Milo's shoulder gently. "We're here," she whispered to him. "We're not leaving you alone in it." Milo nodded without looking up. "It doesn't like when grown-ups believe me," he murmured. "It likes when I'm wrong." 2:57. The air thickened. My ears popped as if the pressure in the room had changed. The lights didn't dim, but the shadows seemed to deepen, as if the corners were listening. 2:58. The tape recorder warbled slightly, the pitch bending. My phone, set face down, began to vibrate without stopping. 2:59. Soren spoke quickly, as if racing a clock that wanted to swallow him. "Say your name," he ordered. "Avery," I said, voice shaking. "Imani," my sister said. "Milo," Milo whispered. Soren inhaled. "Soren," he said. Then louder, "Say what you know." "The moon was white," I said, forcing the words out like nails. "The moon turned green. Memory rewrote at 3. Imani's voice cracked. "Milo exists," she said fiercely. Milo looked up, eyes huge. "The moon blinked," he said. "It reads your eyes." The analog clock on my shelf ticked loudly, each second too sharp. The second hand reached 12. 3 o'clock. Silence slammed down like a door. In that silence, a sensation spread through my skull. Not pain, not pressure, but the feeling of a thought being erased before it could fully form. Like trying to write on paper that refuses ink. Milo gasped and clapped his hands over his eyes. Imani surged toward him, panicked. "Milo." Soren grabbed Imani's wrist. "Don't look up," he hissed. "Don't search for it with your eyes." But my body betrayed me. My neck turned toward the window as if pulled. The curtains were open. Outside, the moon hung low and bright. It was emerald green. And as I stared, the green did something I didn't know light could do. It deepened, folding inward like a mouth opening. For an instant, I saw what was behind it. Not space. A surface of moving lines, countless strokes of ink, curling and crossing, rewriting themselves endlessly. A language made of correction. The moon wasn't reflecting sunlight. It was reflecting authorship. A voice entered my mind, not loud, not angry, tired, almost bored. "You keep old versions like trophies." My tongue went numb. My thoughts slowed, thickened, syrupy. Soren shouted my name, but it sounded far away. "Continuity requires cleaning," the voice continued. "You're messy." Imani was crying now, silently, tears streaming down her face as she held Milo. Milo's hands were still over his eyes, fingers pressed hard as if he could stop the rewrite by refusing to see. On the table, one of the printouts began to fade. Not burn. Not tear. Fade like ink deciding it had never been applied. The white moon in the photo paled, then shifted to blue. My stomach dropped. Soren slammed his palm down on the photo, as if physical force could keep it in place. "No," he growled. The voice seemed to notice him, and for the first time it carried something like irritation. "You again." Soren's face contorted with effort. He grabbed his notebook and began to write furiously, pressing so hard the pen nearly snapped. He shoved the notebook toward me without looking up. "Read," he rasped. "Out loud. Keep it in air." I forced my eyes down from the window, away from the green pole. On the page, Soren had written a sentence over and over, each repetition darker. "The moon was white. The moon was white. The moon was white." I read it aloud, voice shaking. Imani joined in, sobbing through the words. Milo whispered along, still covering his eyes. The room seemed to tremble, not physically, but in the way a story trembles when someone insists on a different ending. The voice sharpened. "If you insist on contradiction, you will be revised." And then the most horrifying thing happened. Not a jump scare, not a sudden darkness. A gentle warmth spread through my chest, soothing, persuasive, like a hand smoothing my hair. A thought bloomed in my mind, soft as a lullaby. "It's okay. You're tired. Let it go. It's always been this way." My mouth kept reading, but my brain began to float. The words felt meaningless, like chanting in a language you don't understand. Imani's voice faltered first. She blinked, confused, as if waking from a nap. "Why are we?" she began. Milo screamed. A raw, child scream that ripped through the lullaby like a needle through fabric. "No!" Milo shouted, and he tore his hands away from his eyes and pointed at the window with a shaking finger. "It's writing. It's writing right now." His eyes were wide, reflecting green. And in the reflection I saw it, clear as day. Lines of light moving across his pupils like ink across glass. The moon wasn't just changing memories. It was using eyes as paper. Soren lunged and grabbed Milo, turning him away from the window, pressing Milo's face into Imani's shoulder. "Close the curtains." Soren barked at me. I stumbled forward, hands clumsy, and yanked the curtains shut. The room darkened, severing the green gaze. The warmth in my chest weakened like a spell interrupted. The voice didn't vanish, but it receded as if frustrated. "You can hide from the page," it whispered, "but you live in the book." Then the pressure lifted. The analog clock ticked. 3:07. We stood panting, shaking as if we'd just survived a storm. Imani held Milo so tightly he squeaked. Soren sat heavily on the couch, sweat shining on his forehead. "Did we win?" I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. Soren laughed once, bitter and exhausted. "No," he said. "We delayed." I looked at the printout on the table. The photo still existed, but the moon in it was no longer white. It was pale blue. And in the corner of the paper, where there hadn't been anything before, a new caption had appeared, faint as watermark text. "Always has been." My stomach twisted, because I knew what that meant. It had noticed our anchors. It had learned how to edit them. Milo lifted his head from Imani's shoulder, eyes red-rimmed but fierce. "It's going to change it again," he said, voice trembling. "A different color. And then you'll forget this color too." Soren stared at Milo, something like dread deepening in his gaze. "How many times has it happened already?" he murmured. Milo's lip quivered. "More than you think," he whispered. I remember too. My blood went cold. I remembered none. Outside, behind the curtains, the moon's green light seeped around the edges like dye in water. I pulled out my notebook, hands still shaking, and wrote one last line as carefully as I could, pressing hard enough to scar the page. If you are hearing this, check your old photos. Because if the moon could change color overnight and nobody noticed, then the only thing more terrifying was the possibility that, somewhere in your camera roll, it already has. And tonight at 3 a.m. it's going to see who looks